Hey everyone, welcome back to MetalDisciple.com's 365 Days of Metal. My name is George, and this is day 204. Yesterday I talked about symphonic black metal giants Dimmu Borgir, and while doing so, I mentioned Cradle of Filth. Cradle of Filth was a big part of my making the leap from thrash to more extreme metal, so I'd like to talk about them today. From 1996, this is Cradle of Filth and their second album, Dusk and Her Embrace. As a child of the 80s, I grew up with a love for thrash. But as the 80s came to a close and the 90s brought in the alternative grunge movement, thrash lost steam and kind of went away for a while. There were, of course, death and black metal bands that were starting to rise up with a fresh new sound, but at the time I wasn't really aware of them, or if I was put off by the harsh vocals. So by the early mid-90s, things were looking pretty grim for me. I used to make these pilgrimages to a metal record store called Rock of Ages and look for new music there. On one particular trip, I saw a cool-looking poster for some band called Cradle of Filth and their album Dusk and Her Embrace. I'd never heard anything by the band, but the gothic horror image made an impression. A couple days later, I mentioned the poster to this kid that I worked with, who also liked metal, and he told me Cradle was a cool band, and I should check them out. So, next time I was out that way, I picked up Dusk and Her Embrace. The experience was eye-opening, to say the least. At that point, I still wasn't a fan of harsh vocals, so I was initially put off by the band, but the music was so cool and different that I kept listening. Then, I got a look at the lyric sheet, and Danny's lyrics were so intricate and more like gothic poetry than lyrics that I was sucked even further down the rabbit hole. I pored over the lyric sheet while listening to the album so I could make out what Danny was singing, and before long, I was a fanatical Cradle of Filth fan. I became a missionary of sorts for the band, trying to explain to others that the harsh vocals were okay because the music was so cool. Over time, harsh vocals began to grow on me, and I even came to crave them. After a while, clean vocals all started to sound corny to me, and if the vocals weren't at least kind of harsh, I didn't want to hear a band. I overshot the mark a bit and went too far the other way. Eventually, I found a happy medium, and now I enjoy both styles of singing. But Cradle of Filth was the band that started me down this dark path, and I thank them for it. That's all for today. Make sure to check out today's playlist for some tracks from Dusk and Her Embrace. I'll be back tomorrow with more metal.